Welcome back to the Racial Draft Podcast, where Matt Murdock can't see color, can smell it. I am your host, Michael Ford, and I'm running solo this week, or this episode, as we break down the 10th round of our Season 8 Racial Draft, where we change the complexion of the comic universe one draft pick at a time. I'm going to dive right in, because we are on the eve of Daredevil Week in the real world. Daredevil will be kicking off this week on Disney Plus, the resurrection, if you will, Daredevil Born Again. We will, the those of you who are fans of the Netflix continuity, we're happy to hear that it will be a continuation of that story. And I'm really looking forward to, as I imagine most of you are, seeing where the story picks up and how the story picks up. However, we're not going to cover a lot of that on this episode of the podcast. Like I said, we're going to break down round 10. We are still trying to catch up. We're about to also kick off our season 8 dynasty draft. If you're new to our draft process, what we do, of course, is draft our characters to be either solidified or reimagined and or, also known as race bent, reimagined to a particular racial or ethnic background. But what we do on a season to season basis as those characters reset at the end of every season. What we do with the Dynasty draft is these are characters to be held on to for a longer term, essentially indefinitely, until they decide to be either traded or redrafted for the season purposes. I know it's a little complicated, and I apologize for making it so complicated, but we'll get into it as the picks start rolling in for the dynasty draft. But look, before we get into the dynasty draft, I do have to get you up to speed on the end of the season draft, and that's round 10. And we'll kick off round 10 with a character who's a fairly new character, was only introduced this year, or rather, I guess, the end of last year, but this particular run of the Marvel Ultimate Universe. And that character is Lajori Joanna Zakaria. She is the She-Hulk of the Ultimate Universe, so she's not Jen Walters. Her origin is a lot different. And she was drafted by the Polynesian delegation, and is in fact herself Polynesian. Not to get into all of the nuances of her story, but her island nation was the site of gamma radiation testing, and it led to many of the inhabitants of that island dying via gamma radiation poisoning. She lived and was mutated along with some others for the island. She becomes the She-Hulk, and she defends the island and eventually joins the Ultimates. So you can see why the Polynesian delegation would want to bring her into the fold. It just so happens that there's still an Ultimates comic going on, and she continues to play a major role in that comic. Does remain to be seen whether her ultimate future is that of on the Dynasty draft, but as of now, she's part of the season draft. She's going to be brought into the fold of the Polynesian delegation, hopefully now and forever. Moving on from one new character to another new character, but this was a character that doesn't have a lot of ethnic identity yet. And maybe that gives a little bit more flexibility for this delegation. And that would be the Latin delegation. They draft Amaranth Aulut, who you might know from both the New Champions run, which I am unfortunately not current on, and also the Scarlet Witch run. She is the Scarlet Witch's apprentice. She is a witch who has, still at this point, undefined and undeveloped magical power set. And like I said, I think she has a little bit more of a blank slate, especially as compared to the She-Hulk that we talked about earlier. And for that reason, I think that the Latin delegation staked their claim to her. They haven't really gotten into how they intend to view her with a Latina identity beyond just giving her fan cast. And the fan cast that they chose was Ariana Greenblatt, who you might know from playing the young Gamora in Infinity War. You might also know her from Barbie and also from playing young Ahsoka in Ahsoka. So she's coming into her own as an actress. Um, and of course, her playing a superhero, a young superhero, is kind of unbreakable. Um, you should have doubled back a little bit. A major component of what we do in the racial draft is not only are these picks made, but we get to get feedback from you guys from a number of places. There are polls that are on the website, racialdraft.com. You can still vote on all of the characters, whether the level of approval that you like, as far as uh, how you like the pick. You can also on Twitter for the first week after the pick, you can vote there, and also for the first 24 hours after the pick, vote on Threads. Additionally, like I said, or should have said, the on Instagram you can also vote, and those polls remain open for the season, as do the polls on racialdraft.com. So all that was preamble for saying that we got a 100% approval rating for Polynesian She-Hulk. And as far as there was also a fan cast that was submitted of the Polynesian delegation, and that would be Drew Afala, who was an interest and an influencer of Samoan descent. That only got an 80% approval rating, which would have been 40% approval, 40% strongly approve, 40% somewhat approve, and 20% strongly disapprove of the Polynesian character being portrayed by a Polynesian actress. I mean, again, I don't know a lot about Drew Fall's acting ability, so maybe this was more of a pointed critique of her acting and less of a rejection of, the authentic casting. But anyway, uh, jumping ahead to the picking of Amaranth by the Latin delegation, that came up with 50-50. So really, really a split narrative. 50% approval rating with the 50% strongly approving and the other 50% somewhat disapproving. So it didn't quite go over as well. And I would imagine part of that is just that there hasn't been enough of her story being told for people to feel like uh like like there's something that's bringing them into the fold as far as Latina. For the fan cast of Ariana Greenblatt, though, 100% approval rating on that regard, with 80% strongly approving and 20% somewhat approving of the fan cast. So the fan cast was met with, much more positive reaction. Moving on, Jewish delegation. This is a pick that they've picked before. This is Zatanna Zatara, who you probably know if you're, a DC fan. She's another magical character, mostly known for spells where she says things backwards. Um, she, generally is depicted as Greek, but I think there are Jewish Greek people, so I don't think that it's that far of a major stretch for her to be in addition to how she's traditionally depicted, also being depicted as Jewish. For that reason, I'm not particularly surprised that the approval rating is at 75%, so higher than 50%. 50% strongly approve, 25% somewhat approve, and 25% somewhat disapproving of Jewish Zatanna. There was also a fan cast that was submitted of Maria Pedretti, and also 75% approval rating in that respect. 50% strongly approve, 25% somewhat approve, and 25% somewhat disapprove of Jewish Satan. Let's move on to a pick from the South Asian delegation. This is a character that was previously drafted as part of their dynasty draft in I believe season 7. Yes, season 7. And this is a character that we'll probably see a little bit more of. How much of that does remain to be seen, and that is Ava Starr, aka Ghost. You will see her next. You've seen her in the MCU in the Ant-Man movies, and you'll see her next in the Thunderbolts movie. I don't believe that she's debuted in the comics yet. Correct me if I'm wrong in that respect. But to that end, we do know that she's going to appear in the films. And I suppose that's enough for the South Asian delegation. As we know, her mother and her canonically based on the films, her mother and her father. One was white and one was black. But it's not too much to alter that and make her mother South Asian, and or make both of them South Asian for that matter. We actually didn't get a backstory, a reimagined backstory from the South Asian delegation. But to that end, there's really not a lot in her story that suggests that it's a major deviation for Ghost to be South Asian. And I think that in terms of the approval rating for the pick. I'll be checking right now. So yeah, 100% approval rating for South Asian Ghost, with 71.4 strongly approve and 28.6 somewhat approve. We also got a fan cast. This is an actress, sorry, that I'm not terribly familiar with. Risha Mujani, very beautiful woman, but the thing about Ghost is you don't really get to see her face very much. So, apologies. And the approval rating was a little bit lower, 85.7, 71.4 strongly approve, 14.3 somewhat approve, and 14.3% somewhat disapprove of this fan cast. Um, you know, Not too much to say about this reimagining because, like I said, the ghost character. There's not we don't know so much about her that we can really opine on what would encompass um, imbuing her with a South Asian identity again beyond the fan cast. Uh, going from a character that is going to be in Thunderbolts to another character that's going to be in Thunderbolts. This is a pick from the White delegation, and they too are picking from their Dynasty draft roster. This is a character that we know a lot about, both in the comics and in other media, including the films. John Walker, aka the U.S. Agent, aka the guy that they like to give the shield to. That was not Sam Wilson. I think that this is a character that works best for sure as a white guy. I think that this is someone who so much of what he stands for is the notion that he's following in Steve Rogers' footsteps, even though his views are not always in line with the progressive thoughtful values of Steve Rogers. He's much more of a red state Captain America, so to speak. Uh, and for that reason, I think he really works best, possibly only as a white character. So to me, I'm a little shocked that there was only 75% approval rating for white John Walker. I think it should have been a little higher, but be that as it may, 50% strongly approve, 25% somewhat approve, 25% somewhat disapprove of a still white U.S. agent. With respect to the fan cast, they didn't shake things up too much. They kept it with Wyatt Russell, who played him so well in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and again will be playing him in the Thunderbolts movie. And I imagine we'll get rave reviews for it. So 100% approval rating in that respect, 75% strongly approve, and 25% somewhat approve of Wyatt Russell as John Walker. Once again, if you feel differently, the polls are still open as far as where you can vote on racialdraft.com and also on Instagram. So go ahead and cast your vote in either or both places. We count them all. We count all of these, regardless of where the ballots are placed. Um, Moving on to another dynasty pick and another defensive pick. And this comes from our East Southeast Asian delegation, where they are drafting Amadeus Cho. He's a character that you might have seen him pop up in animated form in the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man animated series. He was rumored to be showing up in the MCU in live action in either Captain America, Brave New World, or Thunderbolts. As an app, he did not show up in Brave New World, so maybe Thunderbolts. But there's not a lot to say about him. If you're not an avid reader of the comics, you would know that he's one of the genius characters, the young prodigies, if you will, who takes up a friendship, starts out with friendship based around Bruce Banner, and also has a friendship with Hercules before eventually developing gamma powers of his own, spends some time as a totally awesome Hulk, and then becomes character with his gamma levels mediated a little bit, and he now is known as Braun. He was both in the Champions team and as well as the Agents of Atlas. And he's fairly popular character, one of the more prominent East Asian characters. So it's good to see him sort of remain in the fold for the East Southeast Asian delegation. Um, as far as the polls go, 100% approval rating for him remaining East Asian, with all 100% strongly approving. With respect to the fan cast, they fan cast Logan Kim, who I believe is voices him on in the animated series. I, so they were fan casting him as him in live action. That only got 77.7, sorry, 77.8% approval, 66.6, no, 55.5 strongly approved, and 22.2 somewhat approved, with 22.2 somewhat disapproving. Logan Kim portraying Amadeus Cho. Moving on, we are coming to one of the more controversial picks. This one actually had to go through the challenge process. That's right. It was the multiracial delegation drafted Victor Stone, aka Cyborg, and the black delegation stepped in and said we would like to subject that pick to a challenge, which in my mind was a little bit ill-fated because let's face it, you know, big part of Cyborg's story is that he is a football player, and there are a number of multiracial football players. Sometimes he's depicted as a quarterback. Sometimes he's depicted as a running back. I personally think that it makes a lot of sense for him to be a dual threat quarterback. And again, there are a number of biracial dual threat quarterbacks, most notably Patrick Mahomes, but before him, Colin Kaepernick, who are basically, they are known as super athletic, but they're also known as, being able to run a team as the captain, as a leader, which quarterbacks most often are. I think, particularly if we're talking about the high school and college game, one of the ways that the game has evolved in as far as football is, having these dual threat quarterbacks, these quarterbacks that are a little bit more allowed to improvise while still winning with respect to their athleticism. I think that I definitely think that he needs to have some aspect of his blackness, some aspect of blackness in the character for sure. But I do think that in terms of the perception of him, I think that there is something to be gained from him being multiracial, particularly where we are now with the way that football players are expected to integrate and assimilate into the larger dominant culture. I think that in terms of the pathos of Victor Stone's story, I think that especially being thought of as this golden boy character who then has to deal with, um, a profound change of becoming viewed as a machine, or not just being viewed as a machine, but losing uh, many aspects of his organic reality. I think I think that it definitely doesn't diminish his story at all for him to be biracial rather than just full on black. But I can certainly understand why the black delegation would feel a much stronger tie to the character as 100% black. But again, the challenge did not succeed, as actually 100% passed passed the challenge. And but as far as the approval rating, only 66.6% approval rating for biracial cyborg. I would imagine that the black delegation got in there and voted him down a little bit. As far as there was a fan cast, you might know him, Michael Evans Bearing. You might know him from the television show All American. I believe that's the show he was on, where he played, most notably, one of their quarterbacks. So, stayed on point there. But unfortunately, only a 50% approval rating for his fan cast as Victor Stone. Moving on from Cyborg to the Swana Mena delegation. This is a character that probably a bit of a stretch, I would imagine, in terms of reimagining. Probably one of the bigger stretchers of the round for sure. We're talking about Scott Free, aka Mr. Miracle. Arguably, one could say that there's not a lot about Scott Free that oozes pure whiteness. Obviously, he's not of Earth origin. He is the son of a new god, and he's raised on Apocalypse by Darkseid. Uh, he's not Darkseid's child. He's Darkseid's foster child. But then he eventually escapes to Earth and becomes an escape artist, and falls in love with Big Barda. I think that there are a lot of ways to imagine Mr. Miracle as not necessarily depicted as a white guy. So, I don't think it's a strong argument for him becoming race bent, but I don't think there's a strong argument against him being race bent either. And I think that where how it broke was 66.7% approval rating, with the 66.7 strongly approving and 33.3 somewhat disapproving of Scott Free being reimagined as of Southwest Asian or North African origin, essentially Middle Eastern. We just got a fan cast here. This is Lee Majub, who you may know from the Sonic movies and some other sort of less prominent work. He's a very affable guy. I think that to the extent that there's a playful element to Scott Free, I think that he could probably portray the role fairly well. So we got 75% approval rating for the fan cast, with all 75 strongly approving and 25% somewhat disapproving of Middle Eastern Scott Free. Uh, we're jumping from one of the more controversial to one of the least controversial, and that would be another character that was in the Ultimates universe, another of the brand new characters, and it would be Charlie Ramsey of the Native American delegation. That's right, Native American Hawkeye. The Hawkeye from the Ultimate universe is, I want to say non-binary. Yes, non-binary. Native American Charlie Ramsey, and they had a amazing, very amazing debut in the comics. I would urge you to go back and read their first appearance. As of now, just kind of kicking around. It's part of the Ultimates, doing their thing. Shooting arrows as Hawkeyes tend to do. I do think that we talked about before the way that Clint Barton. There's so much of his character that's amenable to sort of staying a white guy, and his flaws kind of continually being overlooked. Whereas Harley Ramsey has a bit of a chip on their shoulder and is definitely rebelling against the colonial way. So, again, we're talking about a Native American character staying Native American. There's not too much else to say in that respect. So I would be shocked if there was anything but 100% approval rating. And wouldn't you know it? 100% approval rating for Charlie Ramsey remaining Native. And then we come to the final pick of the round, another no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. That is Jefferson Pierce, aka Black Lightning. Why? Who else? The Black Delegation. Really, I could just leave it there. But, I'll go ahead and say this is a character that was created at a time, one of the first Black characters in DC Comics. This is a character that was created during the sort of Blaxploitation era, very much kind of tied into that vibe, but has managed to persist. This is an educator, a teacher, he's a dad now, and he's raising superhero daughters. You might also remember him from the the short-lived Black Lightning television show on the CW, where he was played by Cress Wilson. I apologize to the actor for not remembering his name, but I thought he was played well. I think Black Lightning is a character that definitely could be more prominent in the books. He's got a solo run going right now. He's got a prominent position in the Justice League. But even still, he's a character that I think could be elevated alongside, the big guns in DC. And, fingers crossed that this is something that continues. But one thing that should not change is that he definitely should be black. I mean, he's right there in the name, Black Light. And, you know, all of his virtues, kind of come from him being a strong black man. So 100% approval rating, 75% strongly approved, 25% somewhat approved, but really in our hearts, it's 1,000% approval rating. And again, if you feel otherwise or you just want to bolster how we already feel about these characters, go ahead down to RachelDraft.com or Rachel.draft on Instagram and make your voice known. That's it. Those were the 10 picks in the 10th round of the Rachel Draft. We'll probably quickly, shorter than usual, we'll probably get a breakdown of the 11th round, in a day or so. But, this is a short episode because I just wanted to give you the quick and the dirty about where we are with respect to this 8th season of the Racial Draft. Until next time, all things possible.